Crime is up 500%, Gaetz screamed, his face now the color of a fire truck in distress. FBI data shows it's down 15%, Sarah responded, the statistics appearing on screen with the serene certainty of mathematics. What followed wasn't just a fact check. It was a systematic demolition of every lie Matt Gaetz had told his constituents for years, delivered with the precision of a surgeon removing tumors of deception one by one. Millions of illegals are voting. Gaetz tried again, his voice climbing to frequencies that made dogs nervous. 11 cases nationwide per the Heritage Foundation study, came the response, accompanied by the conservative think tank's own report on screen. The audience's murmur grew louder. These weren't liberal sources. These were their sources, saying their congressman was lying to them. Gaetz's hands gripped the podium like he was on a sinking ship. Sweat poured down his face, mixing with what appeared to be spray tan to create orange rivulets of panic. Gas was $1, $50 under Trump, everyone remembers. National average was $2, 39s. It briefly hit Waller, $87 during the pandemic when oil prices went negative. The chart appeared, showing gas prices by month, clear, undeniable, sourced from the U.S. Energy Information Administration. The audience was no longer just murmuring, they were talking openly. "He's been lying to us?" one woman said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "About everything?" another voice added. The comfortable bubble of alternative facts was bursting, and the pop was audible. Gaetz abandoned any pretense of composure. "Fake news!" he screamed, the words ripping from his throat like a primal scream. "This is all fake news. Deep state manipulation. Socialist propaganda." "Congressman," Sarah's voice remained impossibly calm, "are you calling the FBI, the Heritage Foundation, and the Energy Information Administration all fake news?" The question hung in the air like a noose. These weren't CNN or MSNBC. These were institutions his base trusted, or at least had trusted until their congressman started calling them liars for telling the truth. "They're trying to silence me!" Gaetz was now pacing the stage like a caged animal, his carefully styled hair wilting under the lights and flop sweat. "This is an attack on free speech." "Fact-checking is not silencing, Congressman. You're free to speak. We're just free to correct false statements." Sarah pulled up another slide. "Speaking of which, your claim about schools forcing children to use litter boxes—" "It's happening!" Gaetz shrieked, his voice breaking like a pubescent boy's. "I have parents telling me. 0 documented cases nationwide. The rumor was traced to a satirical website." The source appeared on screen. The audience gasped again. Some were now standing. Whether to leave or get a better view of their congressman's destruction was unclear. Gaetz's meltdown accelerated from spectacular to historic. He kicked the podium. He threw his microphone. He screamed about George Soros and the globalist agenda, while the fact-checker calmly noted that these were anti-Semitic conspiracy theories with no basis in reality. "I'm done!" Gaetz screamed, starting to storm off stage. "This is a setup, an ambush!" Security moved to intercept him, not to restrain him, but to remind him that leaving would violate his contract with CNN. The optics were devastating. A United States congressman being convinced to stay at his own town to understand how a pathological liar met his match. We need to rewind 3 hours to when Matt Gaetz strutted into the Pensacola Bay Center like a conquering hero ret, earning home. This was his district, his people, his safe space where his word was gospel, and his lies were applauded like scripture. CNN's town hall was supposed to be a victory lap. Gaetz had handpicked the venue, stacked the audience with supporters, and prepared his greatest hits of grievance and deception. He'd done this dance 100 times. Show up, spew talking points, attack the media, collect the applause, leave before anyone could fact-check. It was political theater where he wrote the script, directed the show, and always gave himself a standing ovation. But CNN had added something new to the format, something Gaetz's team had somehow missed in the contract negotiations. 3 words that would transform this town hall from propaganda to pandemonium. Live fact-checking. A journalist with a laptop, a database, and the audacity to interrupt lies with truth in real time. This wasn't just about one congressman's relationship with reality. This was about democracy versus disinformation, about whether facts still mattered in a world where lies traveled at fiber optic speed, while truth was still putting on its shoes. For years, politicians like Gaetz had exploited the gap between assertion and verification, knowing that by the time fact-checkers published their corrections, the lies had already infected millions. Gaetz had built his entire career on this gap. Every town hall, every Fox News hit, every tweet, an unchallenged fire hose of fabrication that his base consumed like communion wine. He'd never faced real-time accountability because the system wasn't built for it. Until tonight. He thought he could lie his way through another town hall. He had no idea he was about to become patient zero in journalism's new experiment in live-action truth. While Gaetz was spinning his web of lies, a journalist was loading truth into a fact-checking cannon. But to understand the magnitude of what was about to happen, you need to understand Matt Gaetz's pathological relationship with truth, a relationship that could best be described as, it's complicated. If by complicated you mean completely non-existent. Gaetz didn't just lie, he lied with the enthusiasm of a televangelist and the frequency of a strobe light. His most egregious hits included claiming January 6th was basically a normal tourist visit, that COVID vaccines contained tracking microchips, and that the 2020 election was stolen by Venezuelan voting machines. Each lie was more audacious than the last, like he was competing in some demented Olympics of dishonesty. He'd learned from the master himself. Donald Trump's playbook of flooding the zone with so much bullshit that fact-checkers drowned trying to keep up. The strategy was elegant in its shamelessness. Tell 10 lies in the time it takes to debunk one. By the time anyone corrected the record, you'd already moved on to the next fabrication, leaving truth perpetually playing catch-up in a race it could never win. The genius of this approach was that it exhausted everyone. Journalists, opponents, even supporters who might question the details. Eventually, people gave up trying to parse fact from fiction. Everything became just politics, and in that fog of confusion, men like Gaetz thrived like bacteria in a petri dish. He'd never faced real-time accountability because the system wasn't designed for shamelessness at this scale. Traditional journalism assumed politicians had some relationship with truth, some embarrassment about being caught lying. Gaetz had neither. He'd lie about lying, then lie about lying, creating a recursive loop of dishonesty that made fact-checkers want to drink heavily. His base didn't just tolerate the lies, they craved them. Comfortable lies that confirmed their biases, that made them victims and heroes simultaneously, that transformed complex problems into simple conspiracies. Why grapple with difficult truths about climate change when you could believe it was a Chinese hoax? Why confront systemic racism when you could pretend it was reverse racism against whites? Gaetz fed them a steady diet of what they wanted to hear, and they loved him for it. The escalation had been remarkable. What started as spin had evolved into complete fabrication. He wasn't just shading the truth anymore. He was inventing entire alternate realities. Last week, he'd claimed that Antifa super soldiers were training in secret camps to overthrow Christianity. The week before, he'd insisted that public schools were forcing children to use litter boxes because they identified as cats. Each lie was more unhinged than the last, like he was testing the limits of what his base would swallow. But here's what made Gaetz particularly dangerous. He was good at it. He had the salesman's gift for making absurdity sound plausible, for delivering insanity with such conviction that people wondered if maybe, just maybe, he knew something they didn't. He could cite fake statistics with the confidence of a professor, reference non-existent studies with the authority of a researcher, quote, imaginary experts with the certainty of a scholar. He'd turned lying into an art form, and his district was his gallery. Every town hall was an exhibition of his latest work, each lie more elaborate than the last. He'd never had a critic brave enough to review his work in real time. Until tonight. While Gaetz was spinning his web of lies, a journalist was loading truth into a fact-checking cannon. Meet Sarah Chen, investigative reporter for the Tampa Bay Times, who'd spent the last 3 years documenting every word that tumbled from Matt Gaetz's mouth like toxic waste from a broken pipeline. Sarah wasn't your typical journalist. She'd cut her teeth covering financial fraud, where one misplaced decimal could mean the difference between exposing corruption and facing a libel suit. She'd learned that truth wasn't just about being right. It was about being unimpeachably, undeniably, lawsuit-proof right. When she turned her attention to political fact-checking, she brought that same forensic precision to a field desperately in need of it. Her background in investigative reporting had taught her that liars had patterns. They recycled the same false statistics, cited the same non-existent studies, referenced the same imaginary experts. Gaetz was no exception. He had about 30 core lies that he mixed and matched like a DJ spinning records, assuming no one was keeping track. Sarah was keeping track. The database she'd built was a thing of beauty, if you found spreadsheets beautiful, which Sarah absolutely did. Every Gaetz claim cataloged by date, venue, and variation, cross-referenced with primary sources, fact checks, and expert opinions. She had FBI crime statistics bookmarked, CDC data on speed dial, economic reports organized by year. She'd turned fact-checking into a science, and her laboratory was about to go live. The decision to fact-check in real time hadn't been easy. Traditional journalism frowned on interrupting, on becoming part of the story. But traditional journalism was failing. It was bringing a knife to a gunfight, following rules the other side had abandoned years ago. Sarah had argued, successfully, that when someone was actively poisoning the information well, you couldn't wait until after everyone had drunk to mention the water was toxic. Her preparation was military grade. 3 monitors set up backstage. 1 for live transcription, 1 for her database, 1 for pulling up sources in real time. She'd practiced with colleagues playing Gaetz, learning to fact-check at the speed of lies. She'd memorized the most common false claims, had rebuttals locked and loaded, sources ready to screenshot and display. But beyond the technical preparation was a philosophy that drove everything. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. Sarah believed that lies thrived in darkness, in the gap between assertion and verification. Shine light on them immediately, and they withered like vampires at dawn. Don't let them take root. Don't let them spread. Don't let them metastasize into alternative facts that half the country believed. She'd studied Gaetz's rhetorical tricks, the way he'd rattle off fake statistics so quickly that they sounded authoritative, the way he'd claim everyone knows things that no one actually knew, the way he'd invoke studies show without ever naming the studies. She was ready for all of it. Every trick, every tactic, every technique in the liar's handbook. Her colleagues had warned her about the backlash. Gaetz's supporters could be vicious, and interrupting their hero with facts would paint a target on her back. Sarah didn't care. She'd faced down corporate lawyers and criminal fraudsters. A congressman who couldn't tell the truth if his life depended on it didn't scare her. As the town hall approached, Sarah made FIOs, anal preparations. She tested her connections, reviewed her sources, centered herself with the calm of someone about to perform surgery. She wasn't there to embarrass Gaetz or play gotcha. She was there to protect the truth, to stand between the audience and the lies, to be democracy's immune system responding to an infection. She thought of her journalism professor's words, "Your job isn't to be liked, your job is to be right." Tonight, she was going to be very, very right. And Matt Gaetz was going to be very, very exposed. The fact-checker was locked and loaded. The liar was walking into an ambush. And democracy was about to get a booster shot of truth. And then the fact-checker did something that changed everything. They brought receipts. But first, Matt Gaetz had to perform his greatest hits of deception, not knowing that each lie was walking into a carefully prepared trap. Gaetz opened strong, his voice booming with the confidence of a man who'd never met a fact he couldn't ignore. "Friends, let me tell you what the radical left media won't. Crime in our cities is up 500% since Biden took office. 500%. Murder, rape, carjacking, all through the roof because Democrats defunded the police." The audience erupted in approving murmurs and applause. This was the red meat they'd come for, the comfortable lies that confirmed their fears. Gaetz basked in it, that familiar smirk spreading across his face like an oil spill. He was in his element, conducting a symphony of misinformation with the skill of a maestro. But then something unprecedented happened. A calm voice cut through the applause. Actually, Congressman, according to FBI statistics released last month, violent crime is down 15% nationally since 2021. The words appeared on the screen behind Gaetz, along with the FBI seal and a link to the source. The applause stuttered and died like a car engine, running out of gas. Gaetz's smirk froze, his eyes darting to the screen, then to the production booth, then back to the audience, with the panicked energy of a man realizing the rules had changed. That's fake news, he stammered, trying to bulldoze through. Everyone knows crime is exploding. The FBI's uniform crime report is fake news? Sarah's voice remained professionally calm, but the question hung in the air like a sword. The audience shifted uncomfortably. These were law and order Republicans. The FBI might be deep state, but crime statistics? That was harder to dismiss. Gaetz tried to recover, pivoting to his next talking point with the desperation of a drowning man reaching for driftwood. Well, what about the millions of illegals voting in our elections? Millions! That's why Democrats want open borders. Congressman, the Heritage Foundation, a conservative think tank, found only 11 cases of non-citizen voting nationwide in the last election. Would you like to see their report? The screen changed again. The Heritage Foundation logo, the numbers, the source. Gaetz's face was now achieving a shade of red, previously seen only in hot sauce advertisements. His supporters were looking at each other, confusion replacing certainty. 11 wasn't millions. That was just math. Gas prices! Gaetz almost shouted, abandoning any pretense of smooth transition. Gas was $1, $50 under Trump. Now look at it. The national average in 2020 was $2, $39, Congressman. It briefly dipped during COVID when no one was driving, but stop interrupting me! The words exploded from Gaetz like a geyser of frustration. The audience gasped. Not at the fact-checker, but at their congressman losing his composure. This wasn't the smooth operator they'd voted for. This was a man being systematically dismantled by something he'd never faced before: immediate accountability. He tried to continue, but the damage was spreading like cracks in a dam. Each lie was met with instant correction. Each fabrication was followed by facts. His rhythm was shattered, his confidence evaporating, his carefully constructed alternate reality crumbling under the weight of verifiable truth. The audience's energy had shifted palpably. Where there had been enthusiastic agreement, now there was uncomfortable silence. Where there had been nodding heads, now there were furrowed brows. Some were pulling out their phones, presumably to check the facts themselves. Others were whispering to their neighbors. The spell was breaking. Gaetz could feel it slipping away. The control, the narrative, the comfortable bubble of lies he'd cultivated for years. He'd walked into this town hall expecting a rally and found himself in a courtroom where truth was the judge and he was guilty of perjury in the first degree. His voice cracked as he tried one more desperate gambit. This is an ambush. This is fake news media trying to silence conservative voices. But even that rang hollow. How was fact-checking silencing? How was truth an ambush? The audience that had come to cheer was now coming to think, and that was the most dangerous thing that could happen to a man whose entire career was built on preventing thought. The lies weren't just unraveling. They were detonating in real time, each explosion clearing more fog, revealing more truth, exposing more of the con man behind the congressman. And this was just the warm-up. But this was about more than one liar's bad night. This was about democracy learning to defend itself. The real story wasn't Gaetz's meltdown. It was what happened in the audience as years of lies collided with 8 minutes of truth. The transformation started in the third row. A woman in a MAGA hat pulled out her phone, her fingers flying across the screen. He said crime was up 500%, she whispered to her husband. But the FBI website says... Her voice trailed off as she found the same statistics that had just appeared on screen. The confusion on her face was like watching someone solve a puzzle they didn't know existed. He's been lying to us? The question came from a veteran in the fifth row, loud enough for everyone to hear. It wasn't angry yet, just bewildered, like a child discovering Santa isn't real. But the bewilderment was spreading, rippling through the crowd like waves from a stone dropped in still water. A young man near the back stood up. My cousin died from COVID. Gaetz said it was just the flu. His voice cracked. He knew it wasn't just the flu, didn't he? The fact-checker had shown Gaetz's private emails taking the virus seriously while publicly downplaying it. The personal suddenly became political, and the political had become personal betrayal. Phones came out everywhere, not to record Gaetz's performance, but to fact-check it themselves. The CNN town hall had become an impromptu digital literacy class, with hundreds of people learning in real time how to verify claims. How do I find FBI statistics? One person asked their neighbor. What's a primary source? Asked another. Democracy was defending itself one Google search at a time. Social media exploded like a digital volcano. Gaetz got fact-checked wasn't just trending. It was dominating, pushing aside celebrity gossip and sports scores as Pensacola watched their congressman get exposed. Local Facebook groups, normally echo chambers of comfortable lies, were suddenly battlegrounds of revelation. I've been sharing his posts for years, one woman typed. I feel like such a fool. The real-time nature of it was crucial. This wasn't a fact-check published days later that supporters could dismiss or ignore. This was happening now, in front of them, with sources they recognized and math they could understand. 11 wasn't millions. Down 15% wasn't up 500%. These weren't matters of opinion or interpretation. They were facts, and facts were stubborn things. We need answers, a local business owner stood up and declared. Real answers, not more lies. Others nodded, stood, voiced agreement. The town hall was transforming into something else, a town reckoning. Years of deception were being processed in minutes, and the processing hurt. Some supporters remained loyal, of course. They screamed about ambush journalism and deep state manipulation, but they were increasingly outnumbered by those whose eyes had been opened. The spell was breaking, and once broken, it couldn't be easily recast. An elderly woman near the front summed it up perfectly. I voted for him because I believed him. I believed him because no one ever showed me he was lying. Not like this. Not where I couldn't deny it. She removed her Gaetz campaign button and dropped it on the floor. The small metallic sound it made hitting the ground somehow echoed through the entire auditorium. The audience that had arrived as believers was leaving as skeptics. They'd come for red meat and received a red pill. They'd expected validation and received education. They'd wanted their biases confirmed and had them shattered instead. As people filed out, conversations that would have been unthinkable an hour earlier filled the air. Maybe we should fact-check everything. I wonder what else he lied about. How did we not see this? The awakening was painful but necessary, like setting a broken bone that had healed wrong. The town hall that was supposed to be Gaetz's victory lap had become democracy's classroom. And the lesson was simple. Lies die in the light. Section 8. Truth as democracy's defense. But this was about more than one liar's bad night. This was about democracy learning to defend itself. The Gaetz meltdown wasn't just entertaining. It was educational, showing America how to fight the disinformation plague that threatened to destroy democratic discourse. The power of real-time fact-checking had never been more clearly demonstrated. For years, fact-checkers had been playing catch-up, publishing corrections days after lies had already infected millions of minds. It was like trying to recall poison after it had been swallowed. But Sarah Chen had shown a different way. Administer the antidote immediately, before the poison could take hold. This moment mattered because it revealed a fundamental truth. Lies require darkness to survive. They need the gap between assertion and verification, the delay between claim and correction. Shine light on them immediately, and they shrivel like vampires at dawn. Gaetz had thrived in that darkness for years, but under the spotlight of instant fact-checking, his lies couldn't survive even minutes. Building media literacy through confrontation was more effective than 1,000 earnest PSAs about checking your sources. Watching lies get destroyed in real time taught viewers how to spot deception, how to verify claims, how to distinguish between opinion and fact. The audience hadn't just watched a fact check. They'd participated in one, pulling out their phones and learning how to verify claims themselves. The importance of prepared truth-tellers couldn't be overstated. Sarah Chen hadn't just shown up with good intentions. She'd shown up with receipts, sources, and the expertise to deploy them effectively. This wasn't about partisan politics or personal attacks. It was about professional journalism doing what it did best, holding power accountable with facts. Creating an accountability culture meant changing expectations. For too long, politicians had operated in consequence-free zones where lies were just spin and fact-checkers were dismissed as biased. But when audiences saw fact-checking in action, when they saw their own representatives exposed as liars in real time, they began demanding better. The standard was changing from, "That's just politics," to, "That's just unacceptable." The model was replicable and scalable. Every town hall, every debate, every public forum could include real-time fact-checking. Technology made it possible. Sarah Chen had made it powerful. Local news stations were already planning to implement similar systems. Journalism schools were adding courses on live fact-checking.